A dominant night for Domantas Sabonis, a performance which opened my eyes and gave me a new respect for the new Sacramento Kings all-star big man, spoiled by a disappointing performance from De'Aaron Fox, poor Kings defense, which is nothing new, and the Denver Nuggets really causing the Kings to completely unravel in the fourth quarter. What about this game is surprising? It's not that the Kings lost to the Nuggets, it's how they lost, things that were successful early on that kind of fell apart. And we got some harsh reality for De'Aaron Fox. It's all on today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all regular season and all off season. If you're looking for in-depth analysis, game breakdowns, highlights, interviews with local and national experts, full coverage of your Sacramento Kings from January through December, this is the place for you, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I've been covering the Sacramento Kings for the last 8 seasons for ABC 10 News and television here in the California capital. And I actually have to start off today's podcast admitting something that I said that's wrong, admitting to another of many bad takes that I can add to my overall repertoire as a Sacramento Kings and just professional sports commentator, sports journalist. And I had this thought before I tweeted it early on in this game that aged very, very poorly, very quickly. And that was that, to me, Domantas Sabonis was not someone that I looked at as a guy who is going to be a dominant takeover force for the Sacramento Kings. I really have never envisioned Domantas Sabonis be that. I know he's capable of big performances from time to time, but I really haven't seen a game to which I can recall Sabonis completely taking over a game. And I considered that role to still be the role of De'Aaron Fox for this Kings team. Now, that's not to disrespect Domantas Sabonis by any means. I was not trying to undermine the man at all. What I was thinking is Sabonis is that extremely important all-star caliber presence that completely stuffs a stat sheet. He's a double-double machine. He's capable of having big nights. He, of course, can pass the ball. And he is that guy that is essential to winning. But when it comes to taking over a game, when it's a close game in the fourth quarter and you need a string of buckets, you need a guy to put you on his back and carry you to the finish line, carry you to a win. I didn't think that Sabonis was that guy. I hadn't seen Sabonis really be that guy yet. I have seen De'Aaron Fox be that guy, maybe not as much this season as we saw last season and not as much this season as we've wanted to see. But I thought, and I tweeted out, that I thought that was more of De'Aaron Fox's role versus Sabonis's. Within 20 minutes of that tweet, and that tweet I sent early in the first quarter, or midway through the first quarter of this game, very early on, like 20 minutes later, like that tweet was already garbage. And, you know, I admitted as such. I poked fun at myself, called myself an idiot, called myself a dumbass on Twitter, because Domantas Sabonis had a phenomenal game despite the Kings falling to the Denver Nuggets by a very misleading final score of 128 to 110. The game was a lot closer than that. Completely came unraveled in the fourth quarter, which we will talk about. But Sabonis was dominant in this game. He was fantastic for the Sacramento Kings. And from the get-go, he was looking to go right at Nikola Jokic. And I don't think I said it on the Locked On Kings podcast. I appeared on the Royal Rebounds podcast, which is another fantastic podcast that my guys Barry and Calvin put on. I joined them for an hour earlier today before this game, and they asked me about tonight's game and asked me what I wanted to see. And there were a couple things. One, I wanted to see this Kings team look a little more refined, a little more polished now that they've had a couple of days of practice together during the All-Star break. And for the most part, I would say they did look that, although they still had turnover issues and defensively, they're still a nightmare. And we'll talk all about that all later. But the other thing that I really wanted to see was we've heard comparisons, or at least I have heard comparisons between Nikola Jokic and Domantas Sabonis. Now, of course, Jokic is a reigning MVP. He's an absolute superstar. So I'm not saying that Sabonis is on Nikola Jokic's level, but I've heard people say that Jokic is absolutely the best passing big in the league, and I have no argument to that. And second to him might be Domantas Sabonis. So I wanted to see an element of that in this head-to-head matchup between the two. I also knew that Sabonis was going to get a majority of his time guarding and playing against Jokic. And comparing the body types and body sizes of Jokic and Sabonis, it doesn't look like Domantas should have as much success as he had in this game. Physicality-wise, and I've said this before, Sabonis does not look as strong as he is. And he proves it night in, night out that he is stronger than he looks, very similar to his father. He stepped up to the plate in a major way and in a lot of ways outperformed Nikola Jokic from an individual standpoint in this game. There was nothing about this Domantas Sabonis game that I can point to and go, I did not have a good time watching it. I'm disappointed by what I saw. He was aggressive attacking the basket, looking for his offense in the post, was hitting outside shots, was continuing to distribute, was crashing the glass and battling for rebounds even with the bigger, seemingly immovable Nikola Jokic. Got Jokic not necessarily into foul trouble, but did a good job making sure that Jokic wasn't dominant on either end of the floor, especially when it came to fouls. Like, overall, just a super solid performance for the Kings star big, who in 37 minutes finished with 33 points, 14 rebounds, including 4 offensive rebounds, had 5 assists, a steal, a blocked shot, did unfortunately turn the ball over 4 times, but that was an overall team issue, not necessarily a Sabonis issue. He took 23 shots, went 15 of 23, so a great shooting percentage, 2 of 3 from three-point range. He didn't get to the free throw line as much as I would have liked, and a lot of that had to do with him being guarded by Jokic, and Jokic doesn't get called for fouls too much. He only went to the line for 1 free throw, thankfully knocked down that free throw. But overall, like, Sabonis proved me wrong. And I'm here to admit, I say a lot of dumb things. I have a lot of wrong takes. I have no problem saying that quickly Domantas Sabonis proved me wrong, that he is capable of taking over a game. Now, I still haven't seen that fourth quarter takeover, that when the Kings need him in a close game, he goes out and wins the game for his team. I'm sure he's done that before in Indiana, and forgive my ignorance to not having seen that in Indiana. In Sacramento, we haven't seen it yet. Now, this is, of course, only his 5th game as a Sacramento King. And had the fourth quarter not unraveled like it did, maybe we would have gotten a chance to see Sabonis do that for the Kings tonight. Unfortunately, he never got that chance because the fourth quarter was really a disaster. And it started with Alvin Gentry's odd lineup decision to start the fourth quarter. That's all stuff that we're going to get to in the next segment, because right now we need to talk about something that is brutally honest. Sabonis proved that he's a star. Sabonis proved that he can be dominant, he can take over a game, and he can lead the Kings. But he still needs help, especially from a max contract partner guard who has, unfortunately, a number of times this season faded into the background. Talking about De'Aaron Fox. Fox wasn't good. Like, this was the first game since the Sabonis trade where Fox looked like the way that he has most of this season. It was disappointing. It was really disappointing considering the momentum that he has had since that trade. And I've been first to jump on the mountain and defend De'Aaron Fox since trading away Tyrese Halliburton because Fox's numbers have been great. But unfortunately, tonight, Fox was awful. He was really bad. And if you look at his final stat line, it's a bit misleading too, because he finishes with 20 points on 9 of 18 shooting. So he shot 50% from the field, finishes with 20 points, only had 4 assists, only 1 rebound. So didn't really do much else other than score the basketball. And even that, 8 of those points came in garbage time in the fourth quarter when the Kings were basically out of it. It was basically too little too late. Until midway through the fourth quarter, Fox only had 12 points, and only 2 of them were in the second half. Fox was really a non-factor in this game. And to have a 20-point performance that you can say is a bad performance speaks to how good Fox can be and Fox is, how important he is to the Kings. But in reality, if you can look at 20 inefficient points, it's what you got out of De'Aaron in this game. Now, he had some good moments early, hit a big three or a nice three to really open up his game, had 10 points at the end of the first half. Not phenomenal compared to the 19 from Sabonis, but 29 points combined from Sabonis and Fox at halftime. Typically, the Kings are in pretty good shape when that happens, and the Kings did well in the second quarter to put up 33 points on the Nuggets and work their way back in after trailing by 8 and 10 points early on in this game. But the second half, Sabonis carried on what he was doing well. Fox faded away. And here's the thing, I'm not going to rush to conclusions, to negative conclusions like I'm seeing many Kings fans do on social media right now and having a frustrated, angry reaction towards De'Aaron Fox, seeing a game that unfortunately from him we've seen far too many times this season. I get it. This is not necessarily a one-time thing from Fox for this season, but it is a one-time thing for Fox with Sabonis and with this new group. So I'm not ready to backtrack on the things that I said, the belief that I have in Fox and Sabonis as a duo, and a one-game sample size is not going to push the needle that much for me by any means. However, what I will say is next season, assuming the Kings don't move on from De'Aaron Fox this offseason, and look, I would not be surprised at all. Truly wouldn't. I would not be surprised at all if Fox's name is brought up in trade conversations again this offseason. I don't know. Does De'Aaron Fox, and let's say the Kings have the 7th overall pick, or they have the best odds at the 6th overall pick right now. So let's say they get number 6. Does De'Aaron Fox and number 6 get you number 1 overall? I don't know. Is number 1 overall good enough for that? Can De'Aaron Fox and this year's pick get you a star that's better to pair with Domantas Sabonis? I don't know. My point is, I'm not saying I want the Kings to trade De'Aaron Fox. I'm saying Fox, his name is probably going to be brought up in more conversations, or it wouldn't surprise me at all if Monte McNair pursues those options, especially if this version of Fox that we saw tonight continues or shows up more often than not during these final now 21 games this season. But if Fox is still a King, and I honestly would put money on that, I would expect De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis to be the Kings' big two, hopefully with some upgrades next to him, but the Kings' big two going into the 2022-2023 season next season. Fox cannot play this way. Now, he's going to have bad nights. Sabonis is going to have bad nights. We saw Sabonis have a pretty rough night against the Brooklyn Nets a couple of games ago. It's going to happen. But the amount that it's happened this season cannot happen when Sabonis is here now and you're a max player. The criticism is only going to get harsher towards De'Aaron Fox if he continues to fade into the background like he did in this game. If Domantas Sabonis is having a 33-point dominant performance against a team that is easily better than you with the reigning MVP on it, and Sabonis is going right at him, you have to match, at bare minimum, match that effort. You don't have to necessarily match the production because it's hard to expect both Fox and Sabonis to finish with 33 points on a nightly basis. I'm not necessarily saying that. Numbers are one thing. I did not see De'Aaron Fox at any point look like a star or a leader for the Kings in this game. It looked like Domantas Sabonis was by himself with a bunch of role players. De'Aaron Fox is not a freaking role player. De'Aaron Fox is a star, or he's paid like one. He's a max contract player. You cannot fade into the background like a role player does when you are paid and have the expectations that are on Fox. He had all the excuses in the world before. Even if Kings fans this year were already getting tired of those excuses or weren't giving him the benefit of the doubt for those excuses, now you have a star big. Now you have a partner that you've been needing and haven't had at any point during your career. And yes, you deserve time this season to get used to playing with that guy. But what I saw tonight was not that Fox and Sabonis didn't look like they were used to playing together. I saw Sabonis playing well and Fox not being an impact, not having an impact, not being a factor. That cannot happen. If that continues next season, not only are the Kings going to miss out on the playoffs, De'Aaron Fox is going to be torn to shreds. And honestly, rightfully so at that point. It's concerning. He needs to improve. He needs to get better there. Games like this cannot happen consistently. Every once in a while, sure, but it especially stings when every single game from here on out is crucial if the Kings really want to have a shot at the play-in in the playoffs. The Portland Trailblazers were smacked around by the Golden State Warriors tonight. You had a chance to make up a game. You didn't. Thankfully, you didn't drop anywhere in the standings. You fell a little bit further behind New Orleans and San Antonio. They gained half a game, I believe. I don't know if they played tonight. But even if you're playing teams that are, yes, clearly better than you, like the Denver Nuggets, when they're winnable and you don't show up, spotlight goes on you. And I hate to say that about De'Aaron because you know how big of a fan I am of Fox. Kings defense was still bad. Turnovers were still a problem. Davion Mitchell and Damian Jones had some good moments. So did Dante DiVincenzo. Going to talk about all of that when we come back after I tell you about BetOnline. BetOnline is the absolute best place to do your sports gambling and to make money on your sports knowledge. Look, football might be over for the season, but basketball is in full steam. I'm talking both pro and college hoops. March Madness right around the corner. BetOnline is perfect for all your March Madness national tournament gambling. It's perfect for all your nightly Kings gambling or just NBA general knowledge gambling, from all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land. BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, your podcasts, and your news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, even baseball if it ever happens again. Football next season, they will have stuff for that, of course. Soccer as well. Like, BetOnline has it all. Be sure to head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action at BetOnline, where the game starts. I wanted to see this Sacramento Kings team look more comfortable together. And offensively, we saw stretches where they absolutely did. We saw lineups that we hadn't really seen before or hadn't seen too much of together yet look really, really good, especially when I thought Davion Mitchell and Domantas Sabonis looked really, really well together. And the Kings had other stretches where they made comebacks. Unfortunately, when the Kings went on their biggest runs and their biggest stretches is when they were coming back from double-digit deficits or 8+ point deficits and suddenly tying the game up or getting to within a possession or two, but they can never really take and build a lead. You would love to see the Kings find a way to be close enough to where when one of these runs does happen, it gives them a little bit of a cushion so that they can handle a team like Denver, who you know is going to make a push of their own, especially late in the game. I was happy to see some of those kinks being worked out. I was disappointed, not surprised, but disappointed to see the turnovers for the Kings. 17 turnovers, most of them unforced. 15 turnovers for the Kings, most of them unforced. Unfortunately, the Nuggets scored 18 points off of those 15 turnovers. They didn't kill the Kings necessarily, but more turnover issues, unforced turnovers that are signs of a team that still is not necessarily cohesive yet. And I don't think we could expect the team to be cohesive after 4 games and then 2 practices during an All-Star break. So I'm realistic there, but the turnover numbers were still a bit disappointing to say the least. But then you have just the defense. And look, I knew that the Tyrese Halliburton for Domantas Sabonis trade was not going to suddenly make the Kings a better defensive team. Even with getting rid of Buddy Hield in that deal, even moving on from Marvin Bagley and getting Dante DiVincenzo in that deal, that is a defensive improvement move. Even getting like a guy like Justin Holiday here, giving the Kings more wing depth. Those are better defensive moves, but the Kings still have a significant defensive problem. That's not surprising. To give up 128 points to the Nuggets, it's not surprising. Unfortunately, the Kings were killed on the perimeter again in this game. The Nuggets shot 42%, 15 of 35 from three-point range. Now, I saw a better effort. I saw a good hustle. I saw communication from the Kings defensively. I actually saw a lot of good leadership from Domantas Sabonis on both ends of the floor in this game. But still, defensively, the Kings have a lot of work to do. And that's going to be something that they need to solve and figure out during this offseason. Because no matter what, even if the Kings somehow find a way to make the play-in and make the playoffs this year, it's not going to be because of their defense. I can guarantee you that. They're better defensively than they were, or at least have better defensive personnel. They still have a long way to go. So defensively, I know this team has issues. I wasn't surprised by that. Disappointed to see the amount of turnovers that this Kings team had, but I was encouraged. Other than the way Domantas Sabonis played, I was encouraged by a couple of players in particular. I mentioned how pleased I was with some of the Davion Mitchell and Domantas Sabonis minutes together. I mean, we know Davion provides on the defensive end of the floor. Offensively, Davion Mitchell's confidence offensively has blossomed beautifully this year. Like from where he was at the beginning of the season, not that he was ever afraid or anything like that, but I watched Davion Mitchell attack, and he knows how to get to his spots already. And he's strong enough, he's smart enough to get to his spots. Now, he doesn't always hit the shot, but he's been getting to his spots well. And since really a couple of weeks ago, he's shown that he can be more of an offensive option than I certainly expected from him this rookie season. That being said, he still only had 7 points, 3 of 10 shooting. So it's a weird game to praise him for because he could have been far more efficient, of course. But I don't think Davion Mitchell took bad shots in this game. And I could kind of say the same thing about Dante DiVincenzo, who until a couple of missed threes in the fourth quarter, he was shooting 50% from three-point range in this game. And he was once again taking, I felt, good shots in the flow of the offense. He hit a couple of big threes in transition in big moments for the Kings, especially during one of their major runs that got them back into the game after a third quarter push by the Nuggets. So looking at the offensive games of Davion Mitchell and Dante DiVincenzo, I know what both of them provide on the defensive end of the floor, but I'm seeing the two of them getting good looks in the flow of the offense. And that encourages me. Of course, I need both of them to hit a higher percentage of their shots. The Kings need that if they're going to be taking those shots. But the fact that they look more comfortable, especially Davion looks more comfortable finding his shot, I'm encouraged by that. And I'm especially encouraged by the play of Damian Jones. Like I'm a huge Damian Jones fan at this point. Like he's had moments throughout the season where I've said, I really like Damian Jones. I really like what he's doing there. He always seems to come in and provide the same thing or the same consistent effort. Tonight, he went right at Nikola Jokic when he needed to. When he got the opportunities to guard Jokic, he did not back down. And look, I didn't expect Damian Jones to stop Jokic. I don't think anybody can stop Jokic. All you can do is make things as difficult as possible for him. And Damian Jones had moments like that. He also had a nasty blocked shot on Bones Highland at one point in the either third or fourth quarter that got a great reaction from Doug Christie on the bench. Like, I like Damian Jones a lot. I think Damian Jones needs to be part of the Kings' future. And I hope the Kings find a way to keep him under contract and keep him around long term. I believe, I'm actually going to have to look this up. I think he just is on a 1-year deal that he signed. He might be a 2-year deal. I'm actually not entirely sure. So as I'm looking this up and trying to kill time, I want to just make sure that people understand, like, Damian Jones has worked and battled and earned this opportunity, and he's making the most of it. Yeah, so this is the second year of his deal. He had a 2-way contract last season, and now this is the second year of his deal, and he will be an unrestricted free agent after this season. I would love for the Kings to find a way to bring him back. I don't know how much he's going to cost. I'm sure he's going to have other interest out there. He's not going to be super expensive by any means. He's only like a $2 million player this year. So I would like to see Damian Jones in a Kings jersey long-term. Now, I have realistic expectations for the guy. If he is at best a rotation big that gets a splash of minutes on a nightly basis, that's good enough for me because I know what he is and I can count on him. But maybe he can be more than that for another team. I'm not sure. But I would not hate to see Damian Jones a King long-term. At least that's my feeling on the situation. Another splash of negativity that I got to throw in here. To me, the Kings lost this fourth quarter when they were unable to, and they lost the game because of the fourth quarter, but they lost the game because they were unable to take advantage of the minutes when Nikola Jokic was off the floor. And this is a problem that's been consistent with this Kings team, not just this season, like for years. For some reason, when the best players of opposing teams are out of the game, when the Kings have prime opportunities to make up ground, they fall further behind. They waste those opportunities. And they did so again in this fourth quarter. Now, a lot of that had to do with the fact that Alvin Gentry, for some reason, and I like Alvin a lot, I don't know what he was thinking to start the fourth quarter with that lineup, not featuring Barnes, Fox, or Sabonis. Like, I get that you're probably, in theory, I understand. Like, you're trying to keep the three of them as fresh as possible because you're going to play them big minutes during the fourth quarter, and you want to make sure you're giving them as much rest as they can so that they can come in and be fresh and close this game out and hopefully put yourself in a position to win. But because you started the fourth quarter and literally allowed only a minute and a half of fourth quarter play without those three on the floor. During that minute and a half, I think the Nuggets either went on a 6-0 or an 8-0 run to extend their lead. From that point on, you never really had a chance. And even when those three guys did come back into the game with Jokic on the bench, the Kings didn't make up any ground because of that poor start to the fourth. Look, I'm not blaming this loss on Alvin Gentry. I'm not blaming this loss on any one guy. I put a lot of the weight on De'Aaron Fox. Like I said, I also put a lot of the weight on the Kings defense and their inability to really stop anybody, but that's nothing new. But Alvin Gentry has made some questionable rotational decisions in my mind since Sabonis became a Sacramento King. And as much as I appreciate him, as much as I do think that he will be a part of the Kings' search for the next head coach, I would be shocked personally, if Alvin Gentry is the Kings head coach next season. Kings need to undergo a full-on coaching search this offseason and find the right guy, and I personally don't think Alvin Gentry is that guy. That's just my 2 cents on it. There's another thing that happened and is going on right now that is, of course, bigger than basketball, and it's frightening, it's terrifying, it's uncomfortable, and it impacts one Kings player in particular. I'll talk about that a little bit before we wrap up this pod, after I tell you a little bit about Rock Auto, which is another great sponsor here of the Locked On Kings podcast. Rock Auto is, I consider it like the Amazon of auto parts stores. It's amazing. They make so many great parts and have just everything you need really for any make and model of vehicle. And instead of going to your local auto parts store and being really forced into the part brands and the price points of whatever that store and their warehouse happens to carry, with your phone, with a computer that has internet access, you can go onto rockauto.com anywhere at any time, look up the part that you want, see the different brands, see the different fits for different models of your car, see the different price points, and ultimately save yourself money. I'm talking 30, 50, or even 100% more savings on rockauto.com than you would get from an auto parts dealer or just your local auto parts store. And look, Rock Auto is a family business. They serve do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years, or have served do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto's prices are reliably low for every customer, and they have everything that you could need, like brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet for your car. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution to your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in there. How did you hear about us box, so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. I'll be honest with you, it was difficult for me tonight to get into the groove and the flow of Kings basketball returning. And it's because of what's happening right now in Ukraine. Russia invading Ukraine, and this is not a political show, and I know a lot of people use sports. Hell, I use sports as an escape from the real world stuff that is either too complicated, too stressful, stuff that we don't necessarily want to deal with or we want to get away from for a little while. I understand that completely. But it's one thing to ignore or put aside political agendas and things that are happening in our country that are difficult or frustrating or rile us up or things like that. And to put that all away just to enjoy a sporting event, blow off steam, stuff like that. That's one thing. It's another thing entirely when there are people dying because a country is being invaded by a superpower like Russia. All I want to say is, here on my platform, because I have the opportunity to, I just want, I'm a father now. My son turns 6 months old tomorrow on Friday. I saw videos of fathers in the Ukraine, men who were not allowed to leave the country with their families and escape to safety because Ukraine has called on all men between ages 18 and 60 to take up arms and fight to defend their country. We're talking like a population of like 1 million or so people against the superpower, millions, if not billions, that is Russia. Not that all billion are fighting, but you know what I mean. Russia is a superpower compared to Ukraine. I saw videos of dads having to say goodbye to their kids and their families and in tears, knowing that they might never see their families again. Already, at least last I checked, over 100 have died. 100 Ukrainian soldiers have died. Another 300 plus have been wounded. Like this is scary what's happening right now. And it especially hits home for Kings center Alex Len, who is from the Ukraine, who has family in the Ukraine right now. Now, according to Alvin Gentry, and I think it was Sean Cunningham, my colleague at ABC 10, who reported this. According to Alvin Gentry, Len has spoken with his family, and his family is safe from what we understand. But, like, this is a big deal. And I don't know much about politics. I don't know much about war. I don't know much about anything. Like, I'm a sports guy through and through. So I'm not going to share my opinions on what's going on right now and make this a political talk show or anything like that. All I know is I feel for Alex. I feel for his family. I feel for the fathers, the mothers, the kids, anybody in the Ukraine that's going through this terrifying time right now. And I sincerely hope that despite all of our political differences that we have in this country, that we can at least come together to help people that are in need. And I appreciate the Kings and the Nuggets standing together in solidarity before the game, saying no war. And there have been other NBA teams, other professional sports franchises that have done similar things. I know professional soccer teams have done things like that as well. It's nice to see that, but I hope that people rally behind the idea that regardless of our beliefs, our differences, things like that, that when there are people threatened with war, seemingly, or at least to me, needless violence, needless war, like what's happening right now, that we can respond appropriately. And I don't know what the hell I can do. I don't know what the hell you and I can do. I have no idea. I'm just kind of babbling at this point. But now that I'm a father, it hit home a little harder for me today. And I hope that we can wake up tomorrow with more good news and not bad news, or some good news, I should say, and not more bad news with what's going on. And my thoughts, not that that means anything, thoughts and prayers, but for Alex Len to be having to focus on a basketball game while his family is in the middle of war, I can't even imagine. If any of you are Ukrainian, if you have family in the Ukraine, anything like that, if there's anything that I can somehow do to help, or Locked On Kings can somehow do to help, please let me know. At Matt George Sack on Twitter, email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. If you're watching on YouTube, get loose in the YouTube comment section down below. Plus, of course, if you want to chime in on our Kings conversation, sorry to get so heavy here at the end, but it's something that I felt I needed to address. If you want to chime in on anything that we talked about, Sabonis' big game, Fox's letdown, anything like that, those outlets are perfect for you as well. And tomorrow on Locked On Kings, I will be joined by my guy, finally, Rafael Barlow from the Locked On NBA Draft podcast. And he is overseas in Serbia right now, scouting for NBA talent. And he joined me. We recorded earlier today a conversation giving a preview of the 2022 draft class. He had some interesting things to say about some names for Kings and the Kings fans to keep their eyes on, and also some interesting thoughts about should the Kings be looking to tank and secure as good of a draft pick as they can, or go for the playoffs. I think his answer might surprise you. That's all on tomorrow's podcast, so I hope you'll join me for that. Until next time, my name is Matt George. Thank you so much for listening. I'll talk to you soon. You have been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.